Before the story begins, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know. What time do you usually watch videos? And don't forget to suggest the next story or content you'd like to see. Story 1. The Woman in My Bathroom. I had just moved into my new apartment, a small one-bedroom unit in a renovated Victorian house. The place had charm, creaky hardwood floors, high ceilings, and ornate molding that made it feel like it had history. The bathroom, though, was what sold me. It had a massive clawfoot tub and a full-length antique mirror with a gold frame bolted to the wall beside the sink. The landlord had told me it was original to the house. Been there since the 1920s, he said, as though that were a feature. I thought it was quaint at the time. For the first couple of weeks, nothing unusual happened. I worked late hours and usually showered at night before collapsing into bed. But one evening, while brushing my teeth, I noticed something strange in the mirror. At first, I thought it was just steam from the shower playing tricks on me. The reflection of the bathroom seemed darker, as though the light bulb overhead had dimmed in the glass, but not in real life. I leaned closer, squinting at my own tired face, and then I saw her. She was standing behind me in the mirror, not in the bathroom, just in the reflection. Her face was pale, her eyes deep and hollow, her dark hair wet and hanging over her shoulders. She wore a faded, high-collared dress that looked like it belonged in an old photograph. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me through the glass. I spun around so fast, I nearly slipped on the tile, but the bathroom was empty. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. When I turned back to the mirror, she was gone. I tried to rationalize it. I was overtired. I'd been working long shifts. My mind was playing tricks on me. I convinced myself of that until the next night. This time I was taking a shower. The curtain was pulled almost closed, but the mirror was angled just enough for me to see a sliver of my reflection through the gap. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. The woman was there again, only closer. Her head was tilted, her eyes locked on me. And even though I knew it was impossible, I felt the weight of her gaze through the steam. I froze, shampoo still in my hair, my breathing shallow. When I yanked the curtain back, there was no one there, just the same empty bathroom. Over the next few days, I started avoiding the mirror altogether. I'd brush my teeth, looking down at the sink, towel off in the bedroom instead of in the bathroom. But no matter what I did, she found a way to appear. Sometimes it was just a flicker, her shadow behind me as I passed by. Sometimes it was her face, pressed close to the glass, her lips moving as if whispering something I couldn't hear. One night, I woke up to the sound of water running. My bathroom door was wide open, even though I always shut it before bed. I stepped inside, and the faucet was on full blast. The mirror was fogged over completely, except for one spot, about the height of my face, where something had been wiped clean. In that spot, she was smiling. It wasn't a warm smile. It was stretched too wide, showing teeth that seemed just a little too sharp. I stumbled back, tripping over the bath mat, and fled to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak in the old house. The next day, I called the landlord and asked if anything unusual had happened in the apartment before I moved in. He hesitated before answering. "Well, the last tenant left pretty suddenly," he said. "Didn't even take all her things. We had to clean it out ourselves." "What happened to her?" I asked. He sighed. "She said she kept seeing her dead sister in that bathroom mirror. Thought it was some kind of haunting." That was enough for me. I started looking for a new place immediately. But before I could move out, there was one last encounter. It was my final night in the apartment. Boxes were stacked in the living room, my clothes already packed. I went into the bathroom one last time, avoiding the mirror like always. But as I turned to leave, I caught sight of movement in the glass. She was right there, so close that her forehead almost touched the inside of the mirror. And this time, her lips weren't just moving. I heard her. The voice was cold, almost metallic, but the words were clear. "You can leave the room, but you'll never leave me." I ran out, slamming the bathroom door behind me, and didn't go back until the movers came the next morning. I've been in my new apartment for months now, with plain, modern mirrors on the walls. But every once in a while, when I'm brushing my teeth late at night, I swear I catch a glimpse of wet hair and hollow eyes just over my shoulder. Story 2. The Stranger in the Hotel Mirror. I had been traveling for work for nearly 2 weeks straight, living out of a suitcase and hopping from one nondescript hotel to another. By the time I checked into the Harborview Inn, a mid-range hotel in a quiet coastal town, I was utterly exhausted. All I wanted was a hot shower and a good night's sleep. The room was clean but unremarkable. White sheets, beige carpet, generic seascape paintings on the walls. The only thing that stood out was the enormous wall mirror that stretched from the desk to the bathroom door. It reflected almost the entire room, and for some reason, it made me uneasy from the moment I walked in. I told myself it was just the fatigue making me paranoid. After all, mirrors were standard in hotel rooms. But this one felt different, as though it was too perfect, too clear, like I was being shown the room through someone else's eyes. I set down my suitcase and went straight for the shower. The water steamed up the bathroom quickly, and I felt the stress start to melt away. But when I stepped out and wiped the fog from the mirror above the sink, I froze. In the reflection behind me, I could see the main room of the hotel suite, the bed, the desk, the big mirror. But there was someone sitting on the bed. It wasn't me. It wasn't anyone I recognized. A man, tall, thin, with short, dark hair, sat perfectly still on the bedspread, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He was dressed in what looked like a black suit, but it was old-fashioned, almost funeral-like. His head was tilted slightly, his eyes locked directly on the mirror. I spun around so fast, I nearly slipped on the wet tile. The room was empty. The bed was perfectly made, just as I'd left it. Heart pounding, I leaned back toward the bathroom doorway and glanced again at the mirror above the sink. Empty. No man, just me, dripping wet and breathing too fast. I told myself it was a trick of the steam, a shadow, or maybe just my overtired brain playing games. I wrapped a towel around myself and got dressed, trying to shake off the unease. Later that night, I ordered some takeout and ate at the small desk by the window. The big wall mirror reflected the entire scene. Me eating alone, TV humming softly in the background. At one point, I glanced into it while reaching for my drink and nearly choked. The man was back. He wasn't on the bed this time. He was standing directly behind me, his pale face only a few feet away, expressionless. I turned around instantly, my chair scraping against the carpet. Again, nothing. No movement, no sound, no man. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured his face, so still, so focused, like he was waiting for something. By the second night, my nerves were frayed. I even considered requesting a room change, but didn't want to sound like a lunatic to the front desk. Still, I avoided looking in the wall mirror as much as possible. Around 3 a.m., I woke up thirsty and went to the bathroom for some water. As I stepped past the wall mirror, I made the mistake of glancing at it. The man was there again, but now he was in the bathroom, standing just over my shoulder in the reflection, his head bent slightly toward me as if whispering something I couldn't hear. I spun around, heart pounding. The bathroom was empty. The air felt colder than before, almost damp. That was it. I grabbed my wallet, phone, and shoes and left the room immediately, heading straight to the front desk. The night clerk looked startled to see me so rattled. When I told her I needed a different room, she didn't ask why. She simply nodded, tapped a few keys, and slid me a new keycard. Before I could turn away, she quietly said, "I'm sorry, you had room 308, didn't you?" I nodded, confused. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "You're not the first. People say they see someone in the mirror. We've had the glass replaced twice, but it doesn't help." I spent the rest of the night in a smaller room on the opposite end of the hotel, without a mirror larger than a hand towel. The next morning, I checked out and drove away without looking back. But even now, months later, I can still picture him, standing behind me in that perfect too-clear reflection, waiting for me to notice. Story 3. My sister's reflection. I grew up with my younger sister, Emily, in a small 2-story house that had belonged to our family for generations. We shared a bathroom on the second floor, and there was one thing about it that always unsettled me: the mirror above the sink. It wasn't anything fancy, just a rectangular mirror in a wooden frame, but for as long as I could remember, it had a strange, almost warped quality to it. If you looked into it too long, it felt like your reflection was studying you. Emily loved that mirror. She'd spend hours in there, doing her hair, practicing makeup, or just making silly faces at herself. I used to tease her about being vain, but deep down, I hated looking in it for too long. It gave me the same prickling sensation you get when you know someone's standing just behind you, watching. One evening, when I was about 17 and Emily was 15, I came home from my part-time job at a diner. It was late, around 11 p.m., and the house was dark except for the soft glow of the bathroom light upstairs. I called out for Emily, but there was no response. Thinking she'd left the light on by mistake, I went up to turn it off. The door was slightly open, and as I pushed it wider, I saw Emily in front of the mirror. She was standing perfectly still, staring at herself with a blank expression. "Hey," I said, stepping inside. "You okay?" Her lips curved into a slow, almost unnatural smile, but she didn't turn toward me. She just kept her eyes locked on her reflection. "Emily?" I reached out to touch her shoulder, but she flinched so violently it made me jump and turned to look at me. Her face was pale, and there was a thin sheen of sweat on her forehead. "You scared me," she said, her voice shaky. I think I fell asleep standing here." She forced a small laugh, but it didn't sound right. I walked her back to her room. I told her to get some rest, and tried to brush it off as her being overtired. But later that night, lying in my own bed, I couldn't shake the image of her staring at herself so intently. The next morning, she seemed fine, cheerful even. I asked her about the night before, but she claimed she didn't remember being in the bathroom at all. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing odd little things. Emily began spending more and more time in front of the mirror. Sometimes I'd pass by and see her whispering under her breath, like she was talking to someone. Other times, she'd be standing so close her nose was almost touching the glass, her eyes wide and unblinking. One Saturday afternoon, I finally decided to confront her. I knocked on the bathroom door, and when she didn't answer, I pushed it open. She was there again, whispering. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. She didn't move. I walked up beside her and looked in the mirror. At first, it was just the two of us. But then I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. Her reflection wasn't moving the same way she was. Emily's real body was perfectly still, but her reflection was smiling, wide and unnatural, like the first night I'd caught her in here. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. But Emily didn't react. She was staring so hard into the mirror that her eyes were watering. "Emily, we need to go," I said, grabbing her arm. Her reflection tilted its head to the side, almost mocking me, and then it mouthed something. 3 silent words. I couldn't make them out at first, but then I realized, "She's not yours." I yanked Emily away from the sink. She started screaming, thrashing against me, begging to be let go so she could finish talking. It took all my strength to drag her into the hallway and slam the bathroom door shut. After that, I insisted she stay out of the bathroom unless I was with her. For a while, she seemed to recover. But then, one night around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of the bathroom door creaking open. I ran to find her standing there again, the mirror fogged with her breath. Her reflection was grinning so wide it looked painful, and as I stepped inside, I saw it raise its hand in a slow wave, while Emily's actual hands hung limp at her sides. I lost it. I grabbed a towel and threw it over the mirror, then hauled her back to her room. She cried all night, saying she could hear the other Emily calling to her, begging her to come back. The next morning, I convinced our mom to have the mirror taken down. We wrapped it in an old sheet and stored it in the attic. Things went back to normal after that. Emily stopped waking in the night, and she stopped staring at her reflection for hours on end. I thought maybe we'd beaten whatever had been happening. But last week, while cleaning the attic, I found the mirror again. The sheet had slipped off, and for a split second, I saw my own reflection in it. Only, it wasn't smiling like I was. Story 4. The Antique Vanity. I've always been drawn to antique shops, the musty smell of aged wood, the glint of forgotten trinkets under flickering fluorescent lights, the feeling that each item carries a story. So, when I spotted the old vanity tucked away in the back of a dusty little store in my hometown, I felt an odd pull toward it. It was a beautiful piece, despite the scratches and fading finish. The carved legs twisted like vines, curling into delicate floral patterns. 3 mirrors stood tall above the desk-like surface, the largest in the center and two smaller, oval-shaped ones on the sides, each mounted on hinges so they could be angled inward. The glass wasn't perfectly clear. It had that faint, silvery haze of age, the kind that made you feel like you were peering through time. The shopkeeper, an older man with a gravelly voice, noticed my interest. "That piece came from an estate sale," he said, leaning on the counter. "Belonged to a woman who, well, let's just say she didn't have a peaceful end." His tone was casual, but his eyes stayed fixed on the vanity. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Died sitting right there," he replied, jerking his chin toward the mirrors. "They say her reflection lingered. Customers who've bought mirrors like that before, antiques, I mean, they sometimes bring them back. This one's been here for months. People complain of strange things." He was probably just trying to scare me, but I brushed it off. I'd heard stories like that before, and they never amounted to anything. Besides, I loved the way it looked. I bought it on the spot. The delivery came 2 days later. The movers placed it in my bedroom, directly across from my bed. I spent the evening cleaning it, dusting the carved edges, wiping down the wood, and finally polishing the glass until it gleamed. That first night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the faint sound of whispering. At first, I thought it was the TV from a neighbor's apartment, but then I realized the sound was coming from my room. More specifically, from the vanity. I sat up, staring at the mirrors in the darkness. The center mirror caught the faintest reflection of my room, moonlight spilling through the window. But something wasn't right. In the reflection, my bed was empty. My stomach tightened. I leaned forward, squinting, thinking maybe it was a trick of the light. Then, slowly, I saw movement. A pale woman, thin and long-limbed, was sitting at the vanity. Her hair hung in stringy, wet clumps around her face, her skin almost bluish under the moonlight. She was brushing her hair with an old-fashioned ivory comb. I whipped my head toward the actual vanity. No one was there. When I looked back at the mirror, the woman was staring directly at me, her lips moving as if she were whispering something. I tore my eyes away and pulled the blankets over my head like a child. I barely slept. Over the next week, things escalated. Sometimes I'd catch movement in the side mirrors, someone walking past behind me, even when I was alone. The reflections never quite matched reality. An object would be shifted, or the lighting would be wrong. One night, I saw myself in the mirror, but I wasn't moving the way I was in real life. My reflection sat perfectly still while I was shifting uncomfortably in my chair. Its eyes tracked me, and then, without warning, it smiled. I started avoiding the vanity, draping a sheet over the mirrors. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more insistent. At times, I could make out words, mostly my name, drawn out in a breathy, unnatural way. One evening, my friend Claire came over. She noticed the covered vanity and, despite my warnings, pulled the sheet off. "You're scared of this? It's just an old mirror," she laughed. She sat down on the stool and began pretending to primp, applying imaginary lipstick. I tried to change the subject, but her smile froze. "What?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the side mirrors. "Your reflection," she whispered. "It's not doing what you are." Before I could react, she pushed back from the stool, nearly tipping it over, and stumbled toward the door. I caught her arm, but she shook me off. "There's something in there," she said, her voice shaking. "It was looking at me, but it wasn't you." After she left, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the same room. I moved to the couch that night. At around 2:45 a.m., I woke to the sound of the stool scraping against the floor upstairs. I should have stayed put. I should have left the house entirely. But instead, I crept up the stairs, heart pounding. The bedroom door was ajar, and I could see the vanity's mirrors glowing faintly in the dark. The woman was there again, brushing her hair, but now she wasn't alone. My reflection was sitting beside her. They both turned toward me in unison. The woman's face split into a wide grin, her teeth impossibly sharp. My reflection tilted its head at the same unnatural angle, smiling the exact same way. I ran. I grabbed my keys and didn't stop driving until I was 2 towns over. The vanity is still in that house. I never went back for it. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll wake up in my new apartment to the sound of whispering, faint, familiar, and coming from the direction of my bedroom mirror. Story 5. The reflection that moved first. It happened on a Thursday night in late autumn, when the air outside was brittle with the promise of frost. I was in my bedroom, curled up on the bed with my laptop, half watching an old movie I'd seen dozens of times before. My desk sat against the opposite wall, and on top of it was the tall, rectangular mirror I'd had since high school, one of those cheap, full-length ones with a thin black frame. It leaned slightly forward, so from my bed I could see my reflection, the glow of my laptop screen casting my face in pale blue light. I wasn't paying much attention to it. That was the problem. When something becomes part of the scenery, your brain stops registering details. So when I caught the flicker of movement in the mirror, I thought at first it was just me shifting on the bed. Only, I hadn't moved. It was subtle. My reflection's head tilted slightly, but my own head was still, chin resting in my palm. I froze, eyes darting between my body and the reflection. For a moment, both of us stayed perfectly still, like two people waiting to see who would speak first. Then my reflection smiled, just barely, a faint curve of the lips that didn't reach the eyes. I didn't smile. A chill gripped my spine so tightly I almost couldn't breathe. I snapped my gaze down to my lap, telling myself I must have imagined it. When I looked back up, the reflection was normal again. It was me. Same posture, same expression, same faint blue glow on my skin. I shut the laptop and decided I'd been staring at the screen too long. I walked over to the mirror, leaning in close enough to see the pores on my nose. The glass was cool under my fingertips. Everything looked fine. I went to bed without thinking too much about it, convincing myself it was a trick of the light. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I was brushing my hair in front of the mirror before bed, watching the bristles glide through the strands. My reflection lagged, just a fraction of a second, before copying the motion. It was like a badly synced video call. I stopped brushing. My reflection kept going for 2 more strokes before freezing. I dropped the brush. The sound made me flinch, and the reflection flinched too, this time in perfect sync. My pulse thundered in my ears as I backed toward the bed, not daring to turn away from it. For almost a full minute, it didn't move. Then, with excruciating slowness, it tilted its head to the opposite side, the wrong side, like its neck joints were loosening one by one. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I considered moving the mirror out of my room, but something in me, curiosity, maybe, or a gnawing sense of dread, kept me from touching it. I wanted to see what would happen next. And something did. On the third night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of soft tapping. At first, I thought it was rain against the window, but the sound was too rhythmic. I turned my head and saw the mirror glowing faintly in the moonlight. My reflection was standing at the desk, fingers tapping against the glass from the inside. I wasn't standing. I was still in bed. The tapping stopped when it realized I was awake. It stepped closer, pressing its palm flat against the glass, and its mouth moved. I couldn't hear anything, but I understood what it was saying. Let me out. I scrambled for the light switch, flooding the room with harsh yellow light. The reflection was gone. Just me again, eyes wide and wild, skin pale. I sat in the corner of my bed until morning, every muscle trembling. That day, I told myself it was just stress. I'd been working too much, not sleeping enough, maybe even sleepwalking. But that night, the 4th night, left no room for excuses. I was sitting cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through my phone, when movement caught my eye again. This time, my reflection didn't wait for me to notice. It moved first, quickly, sharply, stepping backward into darkness until I could barely see it. Then, as if yanked forward by invisible strings, it slammed its hands against the inside of the glass. I screamed, the phone tumbling from my hands. The reflection grinned now, wide and unhinged, eyes glinting with something feral. Its hands slid slowly down the glass, leaving streaks that weren't really there. Then, it started knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Pause. 3 more. The sound was coming from behind the glass. I ran. I didn't even grab my phone or wallet. I left the apartment that night and didn't come back until the next day, bringing a friend with me. We carried the mirror down to the dumpster behind the building, shoving it in without looking too closely at it. For weeks afterward, I felt like something was watching me, especially in places with reflective surfaces. Shop windows, black screens, even the surface of my coffee. Every time I caught a glimpse of my reflection, I had to force myself to believe it was really me looking back. Then, one evening, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture of the mirror, propped up against a wall in what looked like a stranger's bedroom. No text, just the picture. And in the reflection, faint but unmistakable, was me, standing inside the glass, smiling. If you've ever looked into a mirror and felt that something or someone was looking back, maybe you know the unease these stories bring. Sometimes reflections show more than what's in front of them, as if they're windows to something that shouldn't be here. So the next time you pass by a mirror, take a closer look and ask yourself if it's truly your reflection staring back.